Right, changing spark plugs on a 2013 VW Audi Group 1.4 TFSI. Thanks to Angus for his guide that got me through this. So we're going to be replacing the spark plugs. I'm going from the VW standard Bosch to NGK Laser Platinum, which I've been led to believe are a slightly better plug. Not much to take off here. We're going to be taking off the coil and plug cover and the air intake pipe to give us some room to work. The cover is on a couple of poppers and a guide at one end, so it's a case of just pulling it up and it will pop off and slide out of the guide. Then the air intake is held on by two spring clips, one at the front into the air filter box. You spring them, slide them onto the body slightly further up to give you no pressure on the clamp, a bit like a Jubilee clip, and then just twist off once it's up. The other side's a bit trickier to get to. It's down at the back of the engine, and you need to release the airbox in order to give you the movement you need to slide the unit out. So again, another spring clip. I couldn't get this one right up on the body of the tube, but I got it up enough to relieve the pressure. Then I was able to slide the airbox off of its poppers. Their poppers much the same as the coil cover. Pops off, that twists off and allows that hose a little bit of movement. Then the clip is up and I'll just twist and wiggle it until it pops off. Right, cover up that hole. That's another good tip from Angus. Just get a glove on there, stop anything falling in. You've got to number your coil packs. They're once they're in, they need to go back in the same hole. Now, I did just initially number up the coil packs, but you'll see later I also numbered the connectors just in case. As it turns out, they wouldn't have been a problem, but I just wanted to make sure. Belt and braces. Now, a lot of people say you can just pop these off with your finger, these little clips. Obviously, in my old age, my fingers aren't strong enough, so I need a screwdriver just to lift the clip so that it allows it to pull off. As the catch lifts up, it kind of releases a taper lock on the plug and allows it to slide up. When I get to the fourth one, I need to use a screwdriver to lift the latch and another one to push the coil because the space is very, very tight up there. So you just can't get hold of it to pull the plug off. So you kind of have to start it up by levering with a screwdriver. You'll notice the centre of the picture, the little air hose that goes to the airbox from the exhaust side. I did try and get that off, but in the end you don't have to, you can work around it. It's got enough movement for you to get the packs out. Next thing, 10mm socket. Just crack these bolts off and then they'll spin out, one on each coil pack. I've sped the video up, I'm sure you don't want to watch me twisting bolts out all day. But yeah, whiz these four out. When they go back in, they're tightened up to 8 Newton meters. Well, my torque wrench doesn't start until 10 Newton meters, but a nip, I'm sure, is what I've done, and I'm sure that will suffice. Now the next stage, this is where Angus's biggest tip is. There is a VW tool for this, but even watching videos where people use the tool, you can end up separating the coil pack from the rubber boot that goes over the spark plug. This method, which is a cable tie under the body and back out, gets so much closer to the centre of the coil pack and means that you get a much more centralised pull. Now what you do to break the seal of the rubber, because it's like a grommet going into the cylinder head, I rotated the coil pack slightly left and right just to break the rubber bond, and then whilst applying moderate upwards pressure, I twisted and moved the coil pack around as if it was on a slight knuckle joint, trying to keep it as central as possible but encouraging it to go up. You'll hear a little like rubber pop as it starts to come out, but I'll do the first one in real time. You do have to take your time. There'll be nothing worse than going through the pain of trying to get the rubber boot out if the coil pack comes off and leaves that in situ, because it's really deep down in the hole and sticky. So take your time, it will come, and this is, in my view, the correct way to do it, and save yourself 30 quid on a VW tool. You've probably heard a little pop. And you know you're getting it because you start to get much more movement in the coil head. You can get your fingers underneath as well, and you can feel the top of the rubber boot on its like sleeve on the coil pack, so you can make sure you're not pulling or separating the two, just to make sure. The other thing is, do this whilst the engine is warm. I think that gives you a little bit more pliability in the neoprene or whatever the rubber is that they're made of, but just gives it a little bit more pliability. And that's it, out it comes. It's worth the wait because you've got no hassle then. I'll follow the same process with the next 4 or 3. Again, I've sped the process up. You might need to, I needed to use some long nose pliers to help me find the other end of the cable tie, because there's a lot of cables and bits in the way down here, and you don't want to hook a cable. That would be a disaster. Pull a cable off as well, so get them pliers in there, get it guided down the right way. You can use you can see where the plug and multi-plug goes into the head of the coil pack. You can use that as a levering point, help you keep it central as you're pulling up, so you don't pull on the wonk. And it also gives you a rotation lever. I'm not putting a massive amount of force in twisting it. And like I say, I mean, you can use a tool that I saw a hook placed in one of the cable ties on one of the pictures to try and give you a bit of extra leverage, but I found my fingers were fine, just pulling up at a constant pressure, not heaving, just a constant pressure, and letting the thing come out naturally. Now it comes. Whilst I'm sitting there illuminated, I've got to give a big up to the old Big Larry torch. I'm not one for brands, but I got it on an Amazon sale, and that is a good bit of kit. It's very bright. I might invest in the actual rechargeable rather than the one just with little batteries in, but yeah, a great bit of kit. And the last one, you can see it's a bit tight for space there. You've got like a rubber hose at the top of the picture between my fingers and the glove over the air intake. And that's quite a stiff old thing. I think that's covering a metal pipe or something. So you don't have a lot of play in here, but still, same process. Straight as you can, constant pressure, twisting left and right with a coil pack just to crack the bead. And it will go. Good. Now you can see just how deep down in the hole the spark plugs are. They're a long way down. You need a special socket to get to them. Thin walled, long reach. Give the holes, if you've got a compressor, all the best. If not, just get a can of compressed air. You've got to have a good old blast down the hole before you take the spark plugs out. I'm lucky enough that I've got a compressor. Now this tool is fantastic. It's made by Laser. Other versions are available. It's got a magnetic pickup for the spark plug inside rather than the conventional old rubber boot. Long reach, thin wall, 3/8 socket drive. On sale at Halfords. Other places are available again, but I got it from Halfords for 13.5 quid, and money well spent. It holds onto the spark plug. You've got no fear of getting it wrong, and it'll eliminate, when you put it back in, the risk of a cross thread, because it is a dead straight drive. Cracking bit of kit. Now these were a bit creaky coming out, but then I got 38,000 miles or 37,500 miles on the clock, and they were the original VW. I've gone through the service history, they've never been changed, so you kind of got to expect a bit of a creak and a croak, but nothing untoward. You can see I'm using a small 3/8 socket wrench, so it's not like I've got a massive amount of leverage on it anyway. You can see that magnetic drive holds the plugs and they just plonk in. Very good system. Hopefully it will last. And once I've got the plugs out, I left the engine to cool. I covered the holes for a while with some tissue, because it is recommended to refit the plugs on a cold engine. Now these were the original VW plugs, and I just, knowing that I'm swapping over to NGK, I've got no doubt they're right. In fact, I did have a conversation with NGK about tightening torques, because the torques for NGK differ slightly from the Bosch ones that VW use. But just to be sure, I checked the size. This is a rough, just so I can get a look to make sure that the electrode is the same length, the body is the same, but they were, you can see they were, just same little dumpy end on it. But NGK use a different washer, that's all. Now, dielectric grease. It's recommended in the VW book, both in here, well, just in here according to VW, but I'm going to also put it on the grommet part, just to try and make the job easier the next time. So you put a little tiny bit of dielectric grease. I got mine from the internet, from eBay. I think it was about £3 for a tin, which I think will last me about 100 years for the amount that you use. Looks like normal silicone grease to me, but I'm assuming it's different. You put a tiny little bit in here. This was a bit too much, but I got a bit carried away on my first one. I've eased off as I go through the rest. But a little bit in there, just to, that's the bit that creates like a vacuum on the plug when you try and get it out. So that just eases it a bit. And then I'm going to stick some, like I say, just on these little like grommet parts, because that's the only other part that comes into contact. And I just want to make sure that that's got a little bit of assistance coming out next time. Now, as I say, I spoke to NGK, and their plugs differ from VW in that their tightening torque into the aluminium head is 20 Newton meters as opposed to the 30 Newton meters recommended by Audi for the Bosch. But I contacted NGK directly, had it confirmed, 20 Newton meters. Now because the torque is so critical on these, I splashed out on a Halford's professional torque wrench, and I'm glad I did. It is a lovely bit of kit. It's got the two dials, which I think are really smart. The sliding up and down, and then the micrometer dial at the bottom, so you can get it exactly right, and then lock it off when it's done, so it won't move. Very nice bit of kit, worth the money, lifetime guarantee. It's not an advert, but I think it's about time I treated myself to a nice torque wrench, and I'm not one that can go to the hundreds of pounds that Snap-on ask. There's the old laser magnetic socket wrench in all its glory. Ready to go with the new plugs. You can see there I've got the spark plug holes covered up with all the tissue, just to make sure I didn't get any debris in. Magnetic plug in place. Captive washer, so no danger of that falling off. It really is, although it's making a bit of a squeak as it's going in, you suddenly come to a stop when the washer hits. There's no, I wonder if I'm close, is that right? It just goes and goes and goes, and then just stops. Bonk. And you're there. Then just whack the old torque wrench on. Now you can tighten the spark plugs down. It's on the box for the spark plug that you can go to that stop point and then rotate. I think it's a 1/12 of a circle, if that's the way you want to do it. I know people say, oh, a nip up and then half a turn, but there is some gumph that says that this is quite a critical thing as to the position of the electrode within the gas flow in the head. And to me, torquing it is the right way. It takes away judgment, really, and measuring angles and all that malarkey. As long as the thread's clean and the plug's down and you torque it, it is going to be in the right place. So I just would rather rely on a torque wrench than measuring rotational angles etc. So each to their own. And then I do a final a cross check, just make sure that the torques are all set again. Now the coil pucks, they go back in. It's a push down and a nip up with the bolt. Now, I only get 2 of these in before the camera falls on the floor, and it switches off, and I don't get any more recording. But they just wiggle back in place, nip up with the 8mm bolt, and then you're reassembling in the reverse order to the disassembly. I'm sorry I can't show you the rest because I didn't realise the camera wasn't recording, and I got a bit distracted. And by the time I realised, I'd put everything back on top, and I didn't want to take it all back off again, just to show you me tightening up a few bolts. But that's basically it, all back together. Job took me about an hour because I was yanking bits out and obviously taking my time, but all buttoned up, fires up straight away, all lovely. Hope that's been of use to you. I'm going to leave a little link in the bottom just as a little thanks to Angus who helped me through this, and hope it's been of help. Thanks for watching.